What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so transparency right quick. Okay, so all right, we got some transparency coming in. All right, so right off the jump, we're going to get this out of the way right fast. Okay, so Mike Walls is gone. Just outright, he's gone. He's been fired. It's being reported that he's been let go, blah, 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 blah. But no, he's been pushed out, as a matter of fact. This is good. This is very good on the Trump administration. Once again, folks, this is how these things are supposed to take place. Now, the left and Democrats and all that, they wanted him gone immediately. And I said, yes. As a matter of fact, he should be fired. Once Goldberg or whatever dropped his information that he had, yeah, I was like, yes, he should absolutely be fired. If it's true that he was the one that added him, which it was, come to find out. So they investigated, they got all that out of the way, and now he's being pushed out. So good on the Trump administration. We need that kind of transparency, as a matter of fact. Now, for the second bit of transparency, my Democrat friends, you guys out there, y'all are going to love this one, as a matter of fact. Y'all are just going to eat this up all freaking day long, and good on you guys. You know what I'm saying? You get a win, finally. You get a win, you get something, you get MAGA admitting, oh, hang on, Trump freaking screwed up. He screwed up kind of bad. He looks like a freaking fool. Check this out, y'all.
Of a gang. And then they looked, and on his knuckles, he had MS-13.
There's a dispute
over that. Wait a minute. He had MS-13 on his knuckles tattooed.
Oh, he had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was Photoshopped. So let me
That was Photoshopped. Terry, you can't do that. Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You know, you're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. I picked you, Terry. But you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry, do you want me to show you the picture?
I saw the picture. We'll
and you
agree
think it was
to disagree.
Photoshopped? Well,
here we go.
Don't Photoshop it. Go look at his hand. He had MS-13.
He did have tattoos that can be interpreted that way. I'm not an expert on them. I want to turn to Ukraine, sir.
Terry,
I want to get to Ukraine.
No. He had MS as clear as you can be, not interpreted. This is why people no longer believe the news, because it's fake news.
When he was photographed in El Salvador, they aren't there. But let's just go on. They aren't there when he's in El Salvador.
They weren't there, but they're there now, right?
No, but they're in your picture.
Terry.
Ukraine, sir.
He's got MS-13 on his knuckles.
All right.
Okay?
Well, we'll take a look at that.
You do such a disservice.
We'll take a look at that, sir.
Why don't you just say, yes, he does, and, go on to something else?
It's contested.
Okay, so apparently it looks like Trump actually saw that picture and thought that the photoshopped MS-13 was actually on his knuckles. Okay, so wow, mind-blowing. What's fascinating about this is, the left come out and was like, that's a Photoshop. It's Photoshopped. Oh, Donald Trump is manipulating the photograph. And it's like, hang on, guys. No, that's just representative of what was on the guy's freaking fingers, what was tattooed across his fingers. That is meant to represent MS-13. Now, apparently, Donald Trump saw the picture and was like, holy crap, the guy's got MS-13. Maybe his eyesight's a little bit bad. I have no idea. But, after that interview, I imagine some of Donald Trump's inner circle, his team was like, Trump, you just screwed up. That was Photoshopped, as a matter of fact. But you know what? Most of these journalists, they understand what de-escalation means. Now, I am going to go in on the journalist as well, because that could have been handled a whole hell of a lot better. As a matter of fact, when Donald Trump said, you want me to show you the picture, he could have just easily said, yes, let's look at it, and then told Donald Trump, look at this a little bit closer, my guy. Look, you can see, that's clearly not tattooed onto his fingers. That's representative of what this is supposed to mean across his fingers right here. Not on his knuckles, on his fingers. And, that would have went a long way to, for one, dispel the absolute nonsense theory that, Donald Trump is making up a bunch of stuff. And then that would have also proven to Donald Trump that, yeah, he didn't actually have MS-13 on his... And the dude would have been a freaking superstar, as a matter of fact. But you know what it is? He had to be combative the entire way through. Oh, well, no, it's this. Well, let's move on. Blah, 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 blah. That's what the corporate press does, though, folks. They don't care about facts at all. Obviously, now you might misinterpret that, but he doesn't care to get to the bottom, to get to the truth, to make the other guy understand, is what I'm getting at with that. All right. That could have easily been de-escalated and you could have had your chance to be a superstar, but instead you took the corporate press route and just decided to be combative through the entire thing. And, you know, this is why we don't have good news coming from corporate news outlets in this freaking country. And it's a shame, y'all. It really, really is a shame. But, you know, it is what it is, and that's what we have to deal with. But let's get into some other news. As a matter of fact, we've been talking about a lot of immigration, and I was going to cover another immigration story. I'm going to just shift that to my next video, and we're going to talk about this because I'm tired of talking about immigration, but once again, here in about 20 minutes, I'm going to have to talk about it again. So, you know, it is what it is. But let's get into this right quick, y'all. Justice Department sues Hawaii, Michigan, Vermont, and New York over state climate action. Now, here we go, y'all. Okay, so we've had pretty much a 180. We had the Biden administration was getting out there and suing on behalf of the climate, for crying out loud, trying to raise your energy costs all over the damn place. And now the Trump administration comes in and it's just doing the complete opposite, right? Now we've had litigation after litigation on this climate nonsense where these states, they think that they can sue energy companies, fossil fuel industry, pretty much the entirety of the fossil fuel industry, sue these people for damage to the climate. Now, that's one of the most nonsensical lawsuits I think I've ever heard, except for, you know, stuff like somebody suing McDonald's because coffee is hot. Makes absolutely no sense. Like, the problem I have with this is, how do you quantify that, right? They say, oh, well, you know, burning of fossil fuels puts carbon dioxide, which warms the planet. Okay, well, how do you quantify, you know, cars and coal-fired power plants and all this other stuff, as opposed to the natural process by which carbon dioxide is pumped en masse into the atmosphere to warm the freaking planet? How do you differentiate those? You can't. So you cannot sue the fossil fuel industry over this nonsense, right? And it's also ridiculous because, once again, but you know, it's par for the course for the left, because, you know, every time we have a school shooting, they automatically try to go after the Second Amendment. They want to take your right to defend yourself away from you, instead of blaming the person that pulled the trigger. They want to go after the gun manufacturers and your Second Amendment rights. And that's exactly what they're doing with this. It's nonsensical. It's silly. That's the nicest way I can say that. It is silly. Just completely and utterly silly to sue. I mean, it makes no sense. You're suing the fossil fuel industry, for crying out loud. How about you sue the people that are the ones responsible for actually pumping the carbon dioxide in? Oh, because you would get sued. The people that are actually bringing the lawsuit would also be sued in that lawsuit, because they are also partly responsible for adding to our climate nonsense that we have going on, our warming of the planet, if you will, our pumping of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This is why these people are insane. Climate is a religion to these people, and they worship climate on the altar of the fossil fuel industry. As a matter of fact, they want to sacrifice the fossil fuel industry, which makes absolutely no sense, y'all. It really does. Which in turn would essentially lead to our society, our modern day way of life, just crumbling and going by the wayside. We would be knocked back 150 or so years, technologically speaking. And they don't seem to realize this or something. It's like they just don't get it. And these ridiculous lawsuits, all they do is make your energy costs skyrocket. Because, once again, it's just like the whole silly idea with, well, let's just tax the corporations even more. Well, you know what they're going to do? They're going to raise their costs. They're going to figure out ways that they can still keep their profits the same. They're going to do whatever they got to do to keep their profits. And when you start suing them for nonsense like this, They're just going to raise their price, for crying out loud, to get back that money. Do you think you're not going to have to? It's like the tariffs or whatever. It's like, are you kidding me? Kidding me on this? It's just nonsense. But let's get into it, y'all. The U.S. Justice Department filed a lawsuit against 4 states this week, claiming their climate actions conflict with federal authority and President Donald Trump's energy dominance agenda. The DOJ on Wednesday filed lawsuits against Hawaii and Michigan over their planned legal action against fossil fuel companies for harms caused by climate change. On Thursday, the DOJ sued New York and Vermont, challenging their climate superfund laws that would force fossil fuel companies to pay into state-based funds based on previous greenhouse gas emissions. Fascinating, that is. And I wonder what that money is going to. This is why this is a problem, okay? Because we have no idea what this money is going to. We see a lot of these companies, these green companies, these like carbon offset nonsense. It's pretty much fraud at this point because we don't see the results from what they're doing. As a matter of fact, yeah, sure, they may go plant some trees every once in a while, but, you know, like, what do you actually do? Where does this money go? Oh, most of the money goes to your CEO that makes 6 or 7 figures, whatever that may be. Oh, and you've got all these employees, and you've got overhead, and you've got rent for a building, and all this other nonsense. Yeah, it's ridiculous, folks. It absolutely is ridiculous, but let's keep going. The suits, which legal experts say are unprecedented, mark the latest of the Trump administration's attacks on environmental work and raises concern over states' abilities to retain the power to take climate action without federal opposition. DOJ's court filing said the state's plans and policies impermissibly regulate out-of-state greenhouse gas emissions and obstruct the Clean Air Act's comprehensive federal state framework and EPA's regulatory discretion. As a matter of fact, I agree with that because what these do, right? If you could sue like a coal-fired power plant and that's it in whatever state, fine, sure. But you're suing the fossil fuel industry, right? Gas companies, oil refineries. These are nationwide. They sell gas nationwide. That is going to affect the gas price, the energy price here. You know, if you have a power plant, a coal-fired power plant that serves multiple states, in other words, yeah, you're going to have an issue here. Now you're trying to regulate outside the state because these lawsuits are going to absolutely induce regulation change in these companies. They absolutely will. So once again, folks, yeah, they're trying to rule outside of their authority. Democrats love doing this, as a matter of fact. The DOJ said the Clean Air Act, a federal law authorizing the Environmental Protection Agency to regulate air emissions, creates a program for regulating air pollution in the United States and displaces the ability of states to regulate greenhouse gas emissions beyond their borders. DOJ argued Wednesday that Hawaii and Michigan are violating the intent of the act that enables the EPA authority to set nationwide standards for greenhouse gases, citing the state's pending litigation against oil and gas companies for alleged climate damage. That's one of the most nonsense lawsuits I think of ever. Climate damage. Oh, our roads and infrastructure have been damaged by the climate from you guys burning fossil fuels. Once again, insane. It literally is insane. All of these cases that go after the oil and gas companies for damage from climate change should be laughed out of the freaking court. But they're not going to be, folks, because we have activist judges in this country. Democratic Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel last year tapped private law firms to go after the fossil fuel industry for negatively affecting the state's climate and environment. Good luck with that. How do you quantify that, for crying out loud? Meanwhile, Democratic Hawaii Governor Josh Green plans to target fossil fuel companies that he said should take responsibility for their role in the state's climate impacts, including 2023's deadly Lahaina wildfire. Holy crap, now they're starting to blame wildfires on climate change. What? Are you freaking kidding me here? How do you know how that fire started? Right? Fires don't just start. Just poof. No, there is always a cause. There is always some ignition source, right? The vast majority of those ignition sources, if that's even how you're supposed to say sources, whatever you want to say, the vast majority of those are usually human intervention, for crying out loud. Humans flicking a freaking cigarette out of the car or something, right? Electrical, a spark from this or spark from that, something. It's usually humans that start these, but so how do you prove that? And it's just fascinating that they're blaming the climate, right? Oh, it's climate change because it's so damn hot. Well, you know what? It's not near hot enough to ignite a brush fire, for crying out loud. The planet has never been that hot, for goodness sakes. Now, sure, can you create those conditions? Yes. But in this instance, do we know that for a fact? We do not. No. Look it up, but we do not. Insane, y'all. When burned, fossil fuels release emissions such as carbon dioxide that warm the planet. Yes, and so do a plethora of other things, right? Some of it naturally. As a matter of fact, cows. That's one of the concerns. Cows farting. Yes. Cow farts. As a matter of fact, they want to try to ban cow farts. How do you combat that, for crying out loud? Look, I understand we need to be good stewards of the planet, for goodness sakes. All these cars. I would love nothing more than to have a bunch of electric cars on the freaking road. But, that technology is still in its infancy, for crying out loud. And it's not there yet. We will get there one day. But I have full faith in the human species to innovate our way through this climate change with, global climate controls, as a matter of fact. Yes, we will achieve that one day because that is not hard. We can already seed clouds, make it rain. Make storms, for crying out loud. We can do this already. We know how to do this. I don't think it's that much further down the road. I mean, we have carbon capture technology we could be doing. We can, salinify the water with desalinization plants. We could turn salt water into fresh water, for goodness sakes. There's all kind of methods. And, there's actually a lot of research going into this. There's other methods too, like these scrubbers that we've talked about in videos of the past, that the Biden administration tried to mandate that every single coal-fired power plant in this country put this scrubber technology that's not fully developed on every stack at every coal-fired power plant in the country by 2032, which is insane considering the technology was still 2 to 3 years out as of, 8, maybe a year ago, something like that. So it's still a little ways out. It's not finished yet. But, in my opinion, like in my, small brain over here, if you want to say that, I mean, it's an average size brain, because I got an average size head, but regardless of that, but in my brain, right, if we can do this for the scrubbers, for the stacks, the emission stacks at coal-fired power plants, we can do this for cars too. That technology can be downsized. As a matter of fact, now, what that will do to the performance of said vehicle, I'm not sure. Probably reduce the performance. Probably, but I think it can be done. Will it be expensive? Probably so. It just depends on the human species. Are we willing to pump a bunch of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? Or do we want to pay a little bit more for the vehicle and have the emissions coming out of that vehicle reduced by 90%? Because that's what that technology supposedly does. It will reduce carbon emissions by 90% through carbon capture technology, which is fascinating as hell to me. I love tech, by the way. I love tech outright. But it's just fascinating. But these people, they're losing their freaking minds over this nonsense. A spokesperson for Democratic Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer's office deferred to Nessel when asked for comment. Oh, is that so? The lawsuit is at best frivolous and arguably sanctionable. Oh, are you serious? So it's sanctionable? A lawsuit. Sanctionable. Insane, y'all. Nessel said in a statement which noted that Michigan hasn't filed a lawsuit. Yeah, but it will. And that's what this is for, as a matter of fact. These people are nuts, y'all. If the White House or Big Oil wish to challenge our claims, they can do so when our lawsuit is filed. They will not succeed in any attempt to preemptively bar our access to make our claims in the courts. They're not. They're just filing countersuit preemptively. It's funny, y'all. These people are funny. I remain undeterred in my intention to file this lawsuit, the president and his big oil donors so fear. Green's office and the Hawaii Attorney General's office did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Meanwhile, Thursday's filing called the Superfund Act, a federal law enacted to address the harm associated with hazardous waste sites, a transparent monetary extraction scheme. Trump has suggested the Superfund laws extort payments from energy entities. That's what it sounds like to me, by purporting to regulate the effect of greenhouse gas emissions on climate change. The act necessarily reaches far beyond the states of New York and Vermont, the DOJ argued, saying it incorrectly looks to regulate nationwide and global airspace. Yeah, this is so fascinating, too, that, look, good job for trying to do all this to clean up the climate, but when you have countries like China and India and all these other third world nations, right, pumping way more, I mean, by orders of magnitude more carbon dioxide, they're much more damaging to the climate than the United States currently is before these lawsuits. Why are we not, going over there and protesting, huh? How about you go to China and protest this? Good luck with that, by the way. If we could clean up our emissions, good. But that's not really going to help, because our emissions, as compared to China, is negligible. This is why these lawsuits are so freaking laughable, and all they're going to accomplish is to increase our energy costs. They're not going to accomplish much, especially when you have, once again, places like China and India dumping orders of magnitude more emissions into our atmosphere. In its filings, the DOJ repeated the Republican president's claim of America's energy emergency and crisis, but legal experts raised concern over the government's arguments. Michael Girard, founder and faculty director of the Columbia University Sabine Center for Climate Change Law, said usual procedure is the DOJ asking a court to intervene in pending environmental litigation, as is the case in some instances across the country. While this week's suits are consistent with Trump's plans to oppose state action that interfere with energy dominance, it's highly unusual, Girard told the Associated Press. So what? He's trying to get on top of this before they can get to these lawsuits. Who cares? Oh, well, I do. But, it is what it is. What we expected is they would intervene in the pending lawsuits, not try to preempt or prevent a lawsuit from being filed. It's an aggressive move in support of the fossil fuel industry. It raises all kinds of eyebrows, he added. It's an intimidation tactic, and it's telling the fossil fuel companies how much Trump loves them. No, this has nothing to do with the fossil fuel companies, for crying out loud, and has everything to do with common sense, and has everything to do with trying to prevent these lawsuits, to try to prevent these companies from going to court, to try to prevent our energy costs from skyrocketing, for goodness sakes. Ann Carlson, an environmental law professor at the University of California, Los Angeles, who has previously consulted on climate litigation, said this week's lawsuits look like DOJ grasping at straws, noting that EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin said his agency is seeking to overturn a finding under the Clean Air Act that greenhouse gases endanger public health and welfare. Yeah, so what? I mean, is that supposed to be some sort of bad statement? So on the one hand, the U.S. is saying Michigan and other states can't regulate greenhouse gases because the Clean Air Act does so and therefore preempts states from regulating, Carlson said. On the other hand, the U.S. is trying to say that the Clean Air Act should not be used to regulate. The hypocrisy is pretty stunning. No, that is not what he's saying at all. These people are insane, and they're lying about this. That is a blatant lie. They are trying to prevent energy costs from freaking skyrocketing, and they're also at the same time saying, quantify your numbers and prove to me beyond a shadow of a doubt that the oil industry is the sole cause for climate change, or that your litigation takes into account the fact that there are natural processes that produce greenhouse gases. That's all they're saying. Prove it. How do you differentiate that? There is no way to differentiate that. And that's what makes these lawsuits so ridiculous. Hypocrisy, my ass. Trump's administration has aggressively targeted climate policy in the name of fossil fuel investment. Federal agencies have announced plans to bolster coal power, roll back landmark water and air regulations, block renewable energy sources, and double down on oil and gas expansion. Yes, to make your electricity bill cheaper, to make gas prices go down, to make our economy flourish, because that's the bread and butter. People will give a damn less about some tariff if their gas is a freaking $1 a gallon and their energy, their electrical bills are reduced by 50%. Yeah, people won't care about those damn tariffs. These people are just zealots, is all they are. I'll try to find a nicer word, but that's about the nicest word I can say for these people, because they're just climate zealots, right? But these are also the same people that fly around on their private jets and buy beachfront property. Well, hang on just a second. I thought that the ocean, all the glaciers were going to melt and the ocean was going to rise by several feet. Why are you buying beachfront property if it's going to be underwater, according to you? These people don't believe their own rhetoric, folks. They absolutely don't. And now they've had a bunch of people, probably in the millions of people in this country, believing their climate hoax nonsense. Right? Now, hey, look, I'm not saying that climate change is a hoax. Abso-freaking-lutely not. I've seen the data. I've looked at a bunch of it. The climate is changing. But the climate has been changing abso-freaking-lutely since before the Industrial Revolution. We have been going in this direction for a very long time. And what all these climate scientists are saying is that human intervention is accelerating that. That's what they're saying. So we're not causing climate change, as a matter of fact. We are assisting climate change, though, which is to be expected. But once again, like I said, how about instead of suing all these companies to extract money from the system, how about let's put money, invest money into the system, and research ways to innovate our way out of this. Instead of trying to bring everybody down, let's uplift and innovate instead of suing and trying to relegate your worldview upon everybody else. It's nonsense, y'all, but I want y'all to let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. These lawsuits always blow my freaking mind, y'all. They always blow my mind. They're just so much nonsense because, once again, quantify your freaking numbers. That's all I ask. Quantify it and prove it to me. Prove it outright. But they can't. They never will. There's no way they can prove any of their climate change nonsense. Their climate change agenda nonsense. I put it that way. But y'all let me know what y'all think. That's all I got on this one. I want to thank everybody for watching. And y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.